All right, everybody, welcome into the Alley-Oop. I'm your host, Ryan Blackburn. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. All of those positive 5-star reviews and liking and subscribing on YouTube videos, those have been extremely helpful over the course of this last week. Thank you so much for putting in the time, putting in the effort, and supporting the channel. This helps tremendously. On this podcast episode, really excited to talk to the Central Division folks. Lots of interesting teams in this one, some up and down teams, some interesting things to cover with Caitlin Cooper and the Indiana Pacers, Ty Windisch and the Milwaukee Bucks, Justin Rowan and the Cleveland Cavaliers, Kevin Ferrigan and the Chicago Bulls, and Khalil and the Detroit Pistons. Lots of awesome content here. Once again, please rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't yet. Would be extremely, extremely helpful. And tell a friend about the Alley-Oop with Ryan Blackburn. Now, without further ado, here is the Alley-Oop.
Giannis trailing the lob. Oh! Run, 2-on-1. Green the finish. Wow, the alley-oop. Turn the corner. Inside! He made Yusuf Nurkic a screensaver. Here comes Murray. Alley-oop to Gordon. Oh, what a play!
All right, joining me now, Caitlin Cooper covering the Indiana Pacers for us here. She does Basketball She Wrote. Make sure to sign up for that Patreon. It is tremendous content, and really appreciate Caitlin for all that she brings to the basketball community here. Caitlin, the Indiana Pacers, let's talk about them. 7-4 record to begin the season, and 2-0 now in the in-season tournament. But the biggest story about this group has to be just how unbelievable Tyrese Haliburton is, right?
Right, I mean, somehow it turns out that a little bit more of Tyrese Haliburton is actually even better than the normal amount of Tyrese Haliburton. I think that's kind of where it's been. It's not that his usage has gone up a ton or he's taking that many more shots, but he's taking a few more and his efficiency is somehow even better. He's well above 50, 40, 90 right now, up to scoring average by around 4 to 5 points. So getting even a little bit more of him has been a huge boon to the Pacers offense, which is currently ranked number 1 in the NBA, including in the half court. So
number 1 in the NBA, 32 assists to 0 turnovers over the course of these last 2 games for Tyrese. And both come against the Philadelphia 76ers, which is, I mean, one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference, especially. They've been tremendous. 3 of 6 from 3 for Tyrese in the first game, 7 of 12 from 3 in game 2. Just watching that, it seems like he continues to push himself, and the Pacers continue to push him. Take the pull-up 3. You are really good at it. And I know he gets, like, the shooting form gets talked about a lot, but he makes them. And he is improved in such a tremendous way for, like, a player that I think a lot of people thought would be a role player at the NBA level. He is a true blue superstar.
yeah, I mean, there was one in the second game against Philadelphia on Tuesday night where he literally was dribbling up in transition, and I don't know that I've ever seen him, let alone, probably just about Steph, maybe, fake a handoff to Obi Toppin in transition at the three-point arc, fake it, and then just automatically turn and pop a 3 and make it. I was trying to look up on Second Spectrum if that event had occurred back-to-back where somebody faked a handoff and then made a 3, and I couldn't find a return. So
Wild.
that's the type of stuff that Tyrese is doing right now.
Well, he's so creative, and he's so, like, the decision-making. I made a point about this a couple videos ago, about how awesome the decision-making always is with him. He's always been a low turnover guy. He's always driving positive offense. And the simple act of not making mistakes when you're out there, it helps everything, where everybody knows where to be. Everybody can expect the ball in the right place at the right time. And he has helped elevate this group to the best offense in the NBA. And I don't know if it's going to keep up. Like, it's still very early in the season, but I don't see any reason why this should stop. That he is making consistent reads, and Indiana is taking advantage every single time. It's been really cool to see. Miles Turner, second option on this team, kind of the less heralded member of that pick and roll duo and that pick and pop duo. But what does he provide for Indiana that helps them become so special on that end?
Well, yeah, man, I think you could see it in this 2 game against Philadelphia. It's been a real hurdle for Miles over the years to play against Joel Embiid. In part because a lot of times he's just not on the court against Joel Embiid. He gets into early foul trouble, which was again the case in this game. He picked up early fouls. The Pacers were going through practically every center. They survived playing Obi Toppin and Aaron Nesmith at the 5 and actually built a lead. But then a big turning point for him is over the last 6 minutes, Miles comes back in to go against Embiid, and the Sixers don't cross-match that for whatever reason, and he's really putting Embiid into space. A lot of times, like, Embiid's not really a guy who's going to go out there against a stretch shooter. Typically, he's kind of going to wave, like, somebody else go do it, and I'm going to stay low because my rim protection matters. So that's kind of free points, but Miles is shooting above 40% from 3 to start the season on pretty decent volume. And what you are seeing, because Miles and Jalen both play somewhat similarly, is they can kind of carry over their style from the starting unit to the bench. And while I don't completely believe in the idea of a stretch 5 in terms of what it does to opposing rim protectors, because a lot of times, like I said, the rim protector's still going to stay back. You are seeing them draw weak side defenders over and stunts over to the point where now if you're playing Buddy Hield adjacent to that pick and roll, it's basically a cheat code. Like, what are you doing then? Like, if Miles has hit a couple threes in that game to the point where, the Milwaukee Bucks are sending a stunt or the Sixers are sending a stunt, and then you have Buddy there to either cut that stunt or just make a 3, and you have Tyrese Haliburton who can, look off a defender, he'll stare at Miles, that stunt will run at Miles, and then he'll throw it to Buddy. Like, there's just a lot of unpredictability, and especially with, like, their Spain pick and roll actions, even when Tyrese hit that dagger against Philadelphia, Buddy didn't play particularly well in terms of box score stats in that game, but him leaking out of the Spain pick and roll action confused Philadelphia's defense just enough that now Tyrese is hitting a dagger. So the 3 of them in combination together just give you a lot of different options that you can go to, and Miles has grown, I think, to an extent, and what he does against switches as well. He's really gotten a little bit better at doing the little half shoulder turn, half fake against a switch or even against a big so that he can get to his hook shot, which has grown for him over the last year and a half, I would say.
He's awesome. And the way that those 3 in particular work in concert together has always been improving, but now it is at this elite level, and teams are struggling to figure that out. And I have no idea how I would guard that if Tyrese is distributing the way that he is and is now capable of scoring the way that he is. Who do you even go to in that situation? Who are you running off the 3-point line when all of those guys are shooting the way that they do? Buddy is like one of the most dangerous shooters we've ever seen. So,
well, and another element. Another element too is they are number 1 right now in points scored out of picks per chance, according to Second Spectrum. So, something that they do is they set more non-contact screens or more ghost screens than any other team in the NBA per 100 possessions by quite a bit. And like when you said that Tyrese is always going to find the advantage, that's kind of part of it too, because like even in that Sixers game, the Sixers literally pivoted to putting Joel Embiid on TJ McConnell so that they could keep him around the basket. The Pacers were just like, okay, well, we'll just use TJ McConnell as the screener then. So Embiid has to come up closer to Tyrese, and as soon as he does, Tyrese is like, oh, I'm just going to reject that pick. I'm going to draw the person off the read spot, and now I'm finding Obi Toppin, and Obi Toppin hasn't shot the 3 particularly well to start the season, but he does do a lot of cutting underneath and around the pick and roll to the point where, they had the second highest output in franchise history against the San Antonio Spurs, and a pretty decent part of that was Victor Wembanyama was guarding Obi Toppin as like he likes to do on the weak side, and he just takes up so much space that the Pacers were like, hey, literally anytime you're on the ball side and Victor's guarding you, you're moving to the other side of the court. You're making a shallow cut. You're cutting underneath the basket, and that just makes the pick and roll that much harder to defend against them because now who's the tagger? It's those types of things.
Yeah, it is, I think, a creative mind's dream in a lot of ways, and it's one of the reasons why we value your input on this and your ability to see this and to kind of diagnose how it goes, because Indiana is such a creative team in the way that they use these guys and the way that they take advantage of Haliburton's ability to see the floor. 11 to 13 points. You've got 6 different players on the roster that are averaging between 11 and 13. And that doesn't happen if you don't have a guy who is willing to distribute the ball all around the floor. Just who among that group? Is it Bruce Brown? Is it Benedict Mathurin? Is it like who among that group has really stood out in a way where maybe not separating themselves, but better than expected?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it best. Like, Tyrese is so inclusive, and because of the fast pace that they play at, it can really be anybody that goes off on any given night. I think that Ben had a really big and important step for him against the Milwaukee Bucks, not even so much because of what he did on offense. And he scored 26 points in that game, and he scored at all three levels in that game, but because of what he did at the end of the game defensively. And I think what got most of the attention is the fact that he stripped the ball from Giannis Antetokounmpo twice, and it was really good that he sat on that spin move. And it was better because the Pacers actually sent a few double teams, which they can be pretty reluctant to do. But he also was guarding Chris Middleton at the end of that game, too, and prevented Chris from turning over his left shoulder. He got switched on to Brook Lopez and boxed him out. Those types of things are the stuff that the Pacers really need because, like we pointed out, their offense is so formidable to start the beginning of the season that they don't have to be a good defense. They don't even have to be a bad defense. They just need to not be a terrible defense. If they're merely like, meh, that's not great. Like, they're outscoring people by a sizable margin in terms of net rating. So seeing Ben take those steps, if I'm the Pacers coaching staff after I see that, I'm just like going to be running that on an infinite loop at practice and being like, hey, we know you can do this now. Like, you were not great through the first 7 or 8 games. Like, a lot of off-ball lapses. You got cooked by Karis LeVert. There's a reason you haven't been in the closing lineup, but we left you out there in this game, and you did this. So that was, to me, really critical to start the season. Then overall, I just think Aaron Nesmith has been really terrific for the Pacers. They signed him to an extension early, but I don't know how many people who don't regularly watch them know that, like, he was the starting 4 for them last year. He's been coming off the bench at the 4 this year. He plays a lot of different positions. Most importantly, perhaps, is that like when Miles and Isaiah Jackson, Jalen Smith gets hurt, he comes in at the 5 and he's fronting Joel Embiid for a good 5 to 6 minute stretch. He's just a workhorse who can do a lot of different things, and clearly he's been shooting the 3 at a very high level to start the season on pretty decent volume, almost 5 attempts. He's over 40%, and he's also putting the ball on the floor a lot more. You're seeing him do stuff like last year. He would have had, I believe, the highest percentage of his field goal attempts were assisted last year. Like, he really had to be spoon-fed behind the arc in order for him to score. And he worked on the summer to be able to do some stuff above the break because he thought he was going to be able to play the 3, and now that's paying dividends for him at the 4 as well. So I think he's definitely been a standout for the Pacers in terms of just making a lot of different lineup combinations work for them.
It was interesting. I was going to ask you about Jarris Walker. Just haven't seen him get off the bench that much so far this year, but it sounds like the way that Aaron Nesmith has continued to progress, it hasn't made it as mandatory for Jarris to play early on in his career. That seems like something that could change throughout the season as, well, maybe a guy gets injured here or there. Maybe there's a kind of a flip in the rotation, but as the 27th defensive rating, as that kind of, if it stays in place, it wouldn't surprise me if Jarris gets a little bit more of a run here. You talked about him kind of preseason with me. He might be their defensive option in a lot of ways in some of those lineups, just to be a bigger body and play a little bit stouter in some of those combinations. But to this point, it's hard to argue with the results here for Indiana, despite the fact that he hasn't suited up so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the problem for Jarris is the Pacers are kind of hovering around a 9-man rotation. Sometimes it's a 10-man rotation if they get TJ McConnell out there, and Aaron's playing at the 4 because they already have Andrew and TJ and Buddy. Just that's the way to get Aaron minutes. And because Jarris had some okay moments in preseason at that end of the floor, but then like he played in the 4th quarter of the one game in garbage time when the entire defense was bad against the Boston Celtics. They gave up over 150 points, but Jarris had a lot of moments where if he was switching out to Peyton Pritchard, he got beat. If he was the low man, he was making the wrong rotation. Like, he really likes to chase the ball. He jumped at pump fakes. Like, he just needs to be able to rein some of that in, and I think it's just going to be a matter of time for him because he's coming from a college system that ran a very aggressive hedging scheme where he had to be very proactive, and this is very different than that. The low man's very conservative. They don't do a lot of overzealousness there with help. So if he's out of position, it can kind of throw them off rhythm a bit. So I think that the idea of his defense is a little bit different than what the current reality of it is. So I don't know how they actually envision if he'll end up getting some games later on at the G League. I think that Tom Hankins, the head coach of the G League, had mentioned that in an interview that he did with Scott Agnes that they might get to see Ben Shepherd and Jarris there on occasion. But like you said, I don't think anything's set in stone. So if he does start to get a handle on some of that a little bit more, and there are some injuries, it's not like they have a ton of depth at the 4 spot. I mean, they typically have to play really small if they don't have one of those guys out there.
Yeah, just that seems... It seemed like the natural recourse, but if he's not ready, then he's not ready. That's pretty clear. Last question I have for you. Defense, as we mentioned, 27th. Denver started 28th last season, and they were 28th through basically November. And people in Denver were wondering, why is this happening? What's going on? How can they figure it out? And then they figured it out, and Denver won a championship. How does the defense for Indiana get from point A to point B? It's okay that it starts in the gutter, basically, but how can it improve throughout the season? If you were running the team, what would you do?
I mean, I think with the scheme that they're employing, it's going to have to be a slow build, and you're going to have to hold on to those little steps that you see, like from Benedict Mathurin against the Milwaukee Bucks, and hope that those continue to accumulate as the season goes. Because the scheme is radically different from last year. They didn't have the results that they wanted. I thought a lot of that more had to do with a lot of their on-ball defense and that being leaky. But if you look at the numbers, like what they were doing schematically didn't really match what the numbers said. So they had a very aggressive nail presence. Like I said, they were overzealous with the low man at times. They did a lot of peel switching to make up for people getting beat on the perimeter, a decent amount of nexting based on reads, and yet, they were bottom 5 in points allowed in the paint. Like with that type of scheme, you should be giving more up at the 3-point line, and they were. Like they were giving up high quality 3-point shots, even though they weren't giving up a high, above the break frequency and corner 3 frequency. Now they're basically like they're number 1 in the NBA at limiting above the break threes, and like number 2 or 3 in limiting corner threes. So in a way, it's kind of like we need to teach this mentality of defending individual matchups, guarding your yard is the phrase that they like to say. And even though they haven't mastered that, I mean, they're bottom of the league in rim frequency and opponent points in the paint. Like this isn't necessarily working for them. But I think that you're hoping over time that gets better. And at the very least, we're limiting opponent 3-point attempts. Because last year they kind of were not doing either one necessarily. I think that I'm somebody who still kind of buys into peel switching over the pursuit just because I think it's kinetic energy. I think that you run off to the perimeter instead of, especially because they have guys who are going to be more apt to get beat. They need more, like some of it goes back to Tyrese too, because at the end of the Bulls game, as good as Tyrese has been, the Bulls hunted him relentlessly out of the same set. And they're a team that doesn't want to double. Like if it's a post mismatch, they're not going to double. Like that was rare to see them be doing that as much as they did against Embiid, and to finally make that transition against Giannis once Giannis had gotten up over 40 points in that game. They really wanted to stay home on shooters. So going to need more steps from Tyrese in terms of, in my opinion, hedge and recover is kind of have to be the solution for him if this is what they want to keep doing. So I just think the overall answer, if this is what they envision the defense to be, this is what they think the future of NBA defense is going to be, is they're just going to have to keep getting internal development. Otherwise, the answers are going to have to come externally. I think it's going to have, at that point, it's going to have to be roster changes, because they've now had same coaching staff try 2 radically different schemes, and they're still bottom 5 right now. So those are really the only 2 paths forward, I think.
Well, we will see which path they decide to choose. I think it's probably still too early to make a firm judgment one way or the other on it. But like I said, there is capability to turn it around, to bounce back, even without a major roster change. So we will see what happens. But she is Caitlin Cooper, creator of Basketball She Wrote. Make sure to go follow her on her Patreon and follow all of her Indiana Pacers coverage. Caitlin, thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. And I'll talk to you in 6 weeks, all right?
Hey, thanks for having me again.
All right, joining me now, Ty Windisch, who hosts the Eurostep podcast for the Milwaukee Bucks, does great Milwaukee Bucks coverage here. Ty, thank you so much for popping on. Let's talk about Milwaukee here. 7-4 record. It feels like it should be fine. And then some of the feelings are also a little bit iffy. And I think the perspective that a lot of people have from the outside is that it kind of feels worse than what the actual record is and maybe what the actual numbers are. Why does it feel worse than it actually is in your mind?
Well, I think some of it is skepticism of rookie head coach Adrian Griffin, which is obviously fair. Whenever a rookie head coach comes into a situation like this, I think they're going to be, analyzed under a magnifying glass, even more so than, Mike Budenholzer would have been, who certainly was no stranger to criticism during his time at the helm in Milwaukee either. I think that's a large part of it. And also just the expectation was so big and the team looks so different than the last 5 years of the Bucks, both because of scheme changes and just the personnel. I mean, it's obvious, but without Drew Holiday and Javon Carter and Wes Matthews, adding in Damian Lillard and the guards they added in, you're just going to be worse defensively no matter what you run. That's kind of inescapable. And I think there was a real low point early in the year. The first 4 games before kind of Brook Lopez began dropping again, the team kind of came together with Griffin and said, hey, we have to play this way. Like, this is the way that we're going to defend best. Since then, I think the defense has been better. It's still not great. I don't really expect it to be great most of the time, to be honest, but it's been better. And I think the team overall looks better as well. There's still a lot to figure out. I think even me, like the process is taking longer than expected to get everyone acclimated and on the same page. But overall, I'd say it was kind of started really excited. These first 4 games are kind of ugly. Since then, it's been uneven until last night in Toronto, the second game in Toronto for the Bucks this year. Not many easy wins, you could say. The Bulls one wasn't bad either. But I do think things are coming together. Damian Lillard rounding into form, so that's been really helpful. And I think overall it feels like the Bucks are on a good track, even if they're not the juggernaut people would have expected in the first 10, 11 games here.
Yeah, definitely a bit of a Dame breakout game on Wednesday against the Raptors. 37 points, 13 assists, 16 free throw attempts once again, and a plus 25 in that game. That's a big time win. That's a big time performance without Giannis, especially. And the offense it's just not something people are going to be super concerned about. Yeah, he hasn't shot the ball well, but nobody really believes that he's just going to fall off a cliff immediately. 8th in offense on cleaning the glass. It is really the 25th ranking in defense for the Bucks that I think has a lot of people spooked. I wonder if we could just talk about this like before drop versus after drop in terms of this actual early portion of the schedule. Is that kind of where you're looking for this from Brook Lopez specifically, or what about the perimeter defense is still kind of concerning to you?
Yeah, I think certainly I've been looking at the last, N number of games minus 4 on NBA stats, or, I haven't looked at cleaning the glass as much, but just to see like, okay, what have they been doing, since they started defending that way again. And Brook's numbers, I think you looked at, they allowed 80% shooting at the rim, which was dead last the first 4 games. I believe they had a top 2 figure last time I checked before the Raptors game. And given the way the Raptors shot in that game, I'm guessing it didn't get much worse for Milwaukee. So Brook has had, I think, 5 or more blocks multiple times in these, like one of the only times he's done that in his career. So I think there's a little bit of a concern that I had before I dug into those rim numbers specifically. Like, is Brook not a good fit, or is Brook, has he declined a bit since being second in DPOY voting last year? The answer seems to be no, not really at this point. He's still defending the rim at a high level. I think the defense is coming with him. The perimeter defense is more of an adventure. I think there's a lot of Bucks fans and analysts, and probably myself included, who think Malik Beasley probably shouldn't be starting. The issue there is, once we kind of firmly reached this conclusion, gave him a few games to see, and he tries on defense, he just cannot really navigate screens at all, which turns out is a problem, especially if you're going to drop. Chris Middleton sits out first game of a back-to-back. Jay Crowder comes in the starting lineup. We go, okay, maybe this is like a sneaky indirect lineup change. Chris comes back and Crowder just stays. Well, then Crowder gets hurt and he's out 8 weeks. And then it's like, well, maybe Marjon could make some sense stepping in, but now Giannis is out for a game and they're starting Andre Jackson, probably just to add even more perimeter defense. And, you're not worried about spacing as much with that group if you're replacing Giannis in particular. And then Marjon against the Raptors goes out with a twisted ankle. So I think there's just been a lot of flux, and probably trying to make less lineup changes is better, given they've had to make so many due to injuries. So I think putting in a more defensive savvy player in that group could help the Bucks start stronger, which had been an issue for them before the last week or so. But overall, I think that's just going to have to be more of a personnel than scheme decision. I just don't think there's that many ways, you can really cover up starting Dame Lillard and Malik Beasley together. Their zone has probably been the best. They do that a fair bit, but again, it's, I think they probably just need a different look there. Crowder going out is just tough for that though, because he made a lot of sense to slide in the way he was playing. Just a really unfortunate timing on that abdominal injury.
Yeah, so who then would you kind of go to in that situation? Is that more of a Marjon Beauchamp kind of addition into the starting lineup? Is that Andre Jackson, who a highly touted defensive rookie? Is it somebody else that we haven't mentioned yet? Who would be the ideal kind of running mate at that 2 guard for Damian Lillard in your mind?
I think Marjon probably makes the most sense with Crowder out of the picture. Andre Jackson, for all he does well, not a proven shooter. And the shot is, the form is, it's not picturesque, we'll say, to put it nicely. He makes them occasionally. We'll say it's gotten better. When he came in as a rookie, it was really like Lonzo Ball, early stages bad. Now it's just kind of a hitchy, not ideal form. But I think MarJon is a little more polished offensively. And as much as you don't need offense per se in a group that's going to have Chris Middleton, Damian Lillard, and Giannis Antetokounmpo, I think you don't want guys that defenses just ignore, and they already kind of do it with Brook Lopez. I don't want to make it easy. I'm sure they will leave MarJon or whoever. I mean, they leave Malik Beasley, who's a great shooter. That's just the choices defenses have to make, but I'm a little worried about Andre Jackson and Giannis starting, although Andre Jackson does does work really well with the ball, even if he's not shooting. He's a good floater. He's a great passer. Anyway, I think MarJon makes sense. We'll see how, if any, time he misses due to the ankle. Outside of the two rookies, though, I'm not sure there's anyone else who makes a ton of sense to step in. One rookie and one second-year player. Bobby Portis did not start in place of Giannis, as many expected. I think that's kind of just to maintain the integrity to a certain extent of the big man rotation. Not start your two only real playable bigs with Giannis out of the lineup. Wouldn't expect him to start with Giannis either. And Campaign is just kind of the come in for Dame, move the ball around guy. He has played with Dame some later in games, but I wouldn't expect him to start either. And that covers most of the rotation outside of, we got a little Thanasis, we had a little AJ Green. I don't think either of those guys are going to start either, to say the least.
Yeah, it does feel like the Bucks are a little bit hamstrung right now by injuries for one, but also just kind of a lack of choice on the perimeter when you're thinking about, okay, can we put together a good lineup defensively to bolster what Dame and Giannis are going to do offensively? I'm still kind of waiting for that, and I think a lot of people are waiting for that too. Let's talk about this Chris Middleton minute restriction. What's going on there? Because I think a lot of folks, especially when it comes to Milwaukee and why it feels a little bit weird, Milwaukee, like Chris Middleton is one of the most important pieces for this team. And he's always been one of the most important pieces for this team. And it just feels like this minute restriction just isn't going away. What's the latest with him?
Yeah, it's been a little odd that it hasn't gone up more recently. The interesting thing about it is everything that we've heard, it's not like, oh, Chris isn't progressing, Chris can't play more. It's that they have their plan for him and they're being very cautious. I think last year kind of, maybe quickly ramping him up, and then there were some issues with his ramp up. Very sadly, his father passed last year, and kind of that took him away from his first ramp up, and then he had the injury and had to come back again. It feels like, I don't want to say an overcorrection. I'm not a doctor or any sort of physical therapist or anything. Maybe it feels like an abundance of caution after what happened last year, and saying we're going to make sure, he was at 16 for a little bit. He's been around 20 now. We're hoping to see mid-20s and then high 20s, in the coming weeks here. Still not playing back-to-backs. It feels like, from what we've heard, they want to be really cautious and make sure Chris is going to be in position to play his full best basketball, April, May, June, versus trying to get him back fully in November and then have some sort of a setback. So unless until we hear something about, his condition doing worse, I'm not, I would say, worried about it long term. You'd obviously like him to play more. It's weird. Again, I'd love if Chris could play 30 minutes a game. That would help the Bucks a lot. But I guess it's like, I just look at it as weird and a short-term negative for now, and hoping that it goes away before anything worse happens.
Last thing I have for you here, your belief, has that changed at all after watching these first 11 games? What are you kind of expecting from the group going forward, and kind of has these last 11 kind of changed your frame of reference for what to expect from this group at all?
I'd say it dipped after the first couple of games, and then since we've seen the defense, I mean, really it was just not tenable for two of those first four games, kind of worked in two of the others. Just seeing the defense, have that respectability, that baseline of everything else goes wrong. We're giving up mostly mid-rangers. We still got Brook and most of the time Giannis in the paint. That should be enough when Dame and Giannis get more acclimated and get going. So I'd say it dipped, and now it's been slowly rising back up. I think it's been very clear to me these last couple of weeks that, John Horst built a roster to fit Drew Holiday at the point guard, and he is no longer there. And I've said things like this. People go, "Oh, you're dissing John Horst." No, I'm not. That he did a good job, I think, building around Drew Holiday. You're not going to say no to Damian Lillard just because you got Malik Beasley instead of Wes Matthews, just to throw, an example of two guys out there. So I think there's going to be kind of a shifting at the deadline. I think the period between now and then, when, a lot of guys aren't trade eligible yet, really big time for these young players. Your Marjon Beauchamp, your Andre Jackson, to prove, hey, maybe you don't need to get this guy. Maybe we can do this. I would expect they'll get someone anyway. John Horst loves adding defensive-oriented wings at the deadline. And I think a trade like that could help this group a lot, just as you mentioned, the balancing. But factoring in that probably happens to some extent, and this group is coming together, and I think Adrian Griffin is improving as he goes and fitting this roster better. And the adaptability he's shown gives me a lot of hope for the playoffs. It's really the opposite of what the Bucks have done. There have been costs to that in the short term. I do think being able to shift through multiple defensive coverages on the fly in games is a big deal for the Bucks, and it will help them. So I feel good. It's been a rockier road than I'd hoped, but I feel good long-term about this team.
We will see what happens. He is Ty Windisch, host of the Eurostep podcast. Make sure to go check out all of his work covering the Milwaukee Bucks. Ty, thank you so much for taking the time, man. Really appreciate it. I'll talk to you in 6 weeks, all right?
Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me as always, Ryan.
Joined now by Justin Rowan. He is a fantastic expert on the Cleveland Cavaliers, host of the Chase Down podcast, and our correspondent here for the Alley-Oop covering Cleveland. Thank you so much for hopping on, man.
Look at you gassing up this bicycle, calling me fantastic already. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it. It's good to talk to you again.
It just means that you have to provide maximum effort on these next 10 to 15 minutes.
I hate you. That's exactly what it is. The listeners are like, "Oh wow, he's being nice to his guest," but really, it's putting the pressure on me, and I see what you're doing, and I don't appreciate it.
Let's talk about Cleveland. Hey, here we go. Let's talk about Cleveland. The Cleveland Cavaliers, 5-6 record, kind of some below average numbers in terms of like net rating, offensive rating, defensive rating. Injuries, absences have clearly plagued the team a little bit. What have been some of the health issues that have kind of really run through this team at this point? Because it seems like everybody and their mother's kind of dealing with something right now.
Yeah, so unfortunately, Darius Garland had injured his hamstring in preseason. He gave it a go on opening night against Brooklyn. Obviously re-aggravated at that point and missed the next few games. Jared Allen, bone bruise in his foot, missed the start of the season, has been back for the last 6 games. Then Garland comes back. He's starting to get his legs under him. Finally starting to take a few more threes. You could tell he just didn't have the legs there with the hamstring issues and, missing so much time. And then JaVale McGee pushes him from behind and his head smashes into Mobley's knee and he's got a neck issue. So he's questionable for Friday's game against Detroit. It sounds like he's not going to miss too much time there, but it's really been the story of the season. It's been rather unfortunate. They had a game against Indiana where it looked like they may steal it, but they were playing without Garland, Mitchell, and Allen in that game. So it's been very frustrating, especially as you navigate a tough opening schedule for them to be shorthanded in the ways that they are. It's really it's taken a little bit of the wind out of the sails when it comes to this season.
Yeah, it certainly has felt that way, and kind of flirting with 500, under 500 for a little bit here. This team has dealt with some injury issues with this core in the past, where kind of, I think, dating back to right at the end of the season a couple of years ago, where you like heading into the play-in tournament, you're just not sure who's going to play, not sure how guys are going to be able to gut it out. And obviously, you'd rather deal with these issues early, but it doesn't make it better. It doesn't make it more fun to have to worry about it. How have the new guys fit in, whether it's George Niang, whether it's Max Strus? I know that was a big storyline for us heading into the year.
Yeah, so I think the one that's really fit in nicely is Max Strus. Max Strus has been phenomenal. You look at the on-off numbers, and it's as good as anybody on the team. The gravity that he has really does make a big difference. He is averaging career highs in points, rebounds, assists, blocks, steals. The gravity is obviously the main thing that everybody focused on, but people wondered, hey, is this guy going to shoot as good in a wine jersey as he did in a red jersey? Leaving that Miami Heat culture, and not to discredit what Miami did in terms of player development. I think it's very significant, and it played a big role. But this is a guy that seems to have continued to get better. I think the one thing to keep in mind, or the one thing I'm keeping an eye on, is when you look at his shooting splits. In games where Darius Garland plays, he shoots 46% from three, and in games where Garland doesn't play, it's 25%. As I was rattling off injuries, I forgot to mention Ricky Rubio still not with the team. Ty Jerome, ankle sprain, he's been out as well. So the Cavs have been playing a lot of games without a single point guard in the lineup, and for a team that seemed to have a lot of guard depth coming in, somehow we are back in this point where undrafted rookie Craig Porter Jr. Has been playing some minutes. So it definitely it's been a trying start to the season for sure.
No, for sure. And I was looking up this number for Nikola Jokic. I was looking up his clutch defensive rebounding because it feels like he grabs every single defensive rebound. The one player in NBA rotations that is grabbing more defensive rebounds in the clutch? Max Strus.
Believe it. He's been a monster. Like, he's really been contributing. Those were so important in those games where Jared Allen missed. They actually kind of really found something with the front court of Max Strus, Isaac Okoro, and Evan Mobley. Okoro, God, again, another injury I forgot. Like, his knee issue flared up, the same one that had bothered him in the playoffs. So the Cavs are giving him some time off. He's once again out against Detroit. So it's been a very, very long list of injuries when it comes to the Cavs. And like I said before, it came in a tough time when it came to schedule. Dunks and threes does a terrific job of the schedule adjusted net ratings, and coming into prior to the Portland game, they actually had played the toughest schedule, or second toughest schedule, in terms of offenses that they faced. Playing Indiana twice. The worst offense they've played prior to the Portland game was Sacramento, who had the best offense in NBA history and had De'Aaron Fox return that game. So when you look at their adjusted net ratings and whatnot, it's actually not that bad. They're fifth in adjusted net rating, 11th in offense, and fifth in defense, which is surprising for a team with a losing record that doesn't really stand out in any way. So if that normalizes, that's great. But I think sometimes what's really important as analytics people that we need to acknowledge is, just because you're due for regression doesn't mean it's necessarily going to occur. And when things aren't going your way, do the players continue to buy into the system? Do they continue to execute at the same level that would warrant or would invite that positive regression to come along? That, to me, is the biggest question when it comes to the Cavs, because I think what they're doing works. They're third in expected effective field goal percentage and 18th in effective field goal percentage. So they got positive regression on that side that may be coming. But if they don't get healthy, or if they stop buying into what's going on, in a high pressure season like this one, I can see things going sideways.
It is clearly a high pressure season. This is the first year where you can really genuinely say that the Cleveland Cavaliers should be a playoff contender, should be a team that pushes the teams kind of like what everybody expected to be at the top. But it doesn't just doesn't matter. Like, Cleveland's got to survive. They've got to get through it. And I think everybody feels that pressure for sure. But what you've said and what you've kind of contextualized here is that people have to have a longer term view than just the first 11 or so games of the season. It has to be, hey, let's give this 25 games. Let's see where we're at that point. Are we still dealing with all of these tremendous number of injuries, or are things kind of coming to a head and the team's kind of getting some rhythm together and things are starting to look the way that you envisioned it? I think that there's reason to have faith here. I think that faith should start with Donovan Mitchell, by the way, who we talked about this just before getting onto the show. His season's kind of gone under the radar, in my opinion. Some of the numbers and some of the production that he's putting together has been really, really cool to see.
Yeah, he's been tremendous. I mean, he's been as efficient as ever. The defensive effort has been really high. I think that's one of the things you were kind of keeping an eye on going into this year is, okay, if the offensive burden is shouldered a little more across the board instead of being such a top-heavy team in terms of production, is he going to contribute on the defensive end? And the fact that he's contributing as much as he is with guys being out, with Garland not being himself, with all these guys in and out of the lineup, I think it really deserves a lot of credit. He's giving tremendous effort. I think you're still seeing some of the limitations of him as a primary playmaker and a primary initiator in these games without a point guard, but that's not really what they should be, right? Like, so there's some growing pains there too. Still trying to develop the chemistry with Evan Mobley, whereas last year, when JB broke up the core four in terms of staggering throughout the game, what really worked was Garland with Mobley and Mitchell with Allen. Mitchell with Mobley without Garland and Allen just didn't work, and to this point, it hasn't worked this season either in terms of the effectiveness of those lineups. But sometimes, and you definitely know this as a team that grew organically in the Denver Nuggets and really rounded out the rotation and whatnot. Sometimes you have to do things that don't work initially, that the results aren't there, because it's going to pay off those long-term dividends. It's going to allow you to play a different style in the postseason. You're going to be able to weather the storm of, oh crap, well, Garland got 2 early fouls, so now we're going to have to do something else, right? Like, you have to have that lineup and rotational versatility in order to best prepare for the postseason.
It is about building habits. It's about understanding who you are through and through as a team. And to this point, Cleveland, I think, is still figuring that out. There's still some layers of that where you have to know what Mobley is going to be in these end of game situations. You have to know who's going to have the ball in their hands, who's going to be sort of driving the bus, if you will, and what is going to just in general work in a lot of these cases, whether it's going to be the offensive or defensive end of the floor or both. I think that there are reasons to have optimism, of course, with this group. That hasn't changed for me in any way, shape, or form. I would just like to see this team get a little bit of a runway here, see if everybody can get back on track, see if everybody can get back healthy, and see what it looks like with Max Strus, with George Niang, sort of pigeonholing and just filling in the gaps, if you will.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And, no one's going to sit here and feel sorry for the Cavs that they've had to go through these injuries, right? Like, I guess one of the bright sides is the Eastern Conference has been very flat. They're 2 games out of the 3 seed. It seems like everybody's got 5 or 6 losses at this point. So they can turn it around, but the schedule doesn't do them any favors either. Like, the biggest thing that they can kind of hang their hat on after this 10-day road trip is that 7 of the next 8 games are going to be at home, but they're tough. I mean, Detroit in season tournament Friday, that's another one of those get right games. You can hope you get back to 500, but then you play Denver. Then you have a back-to-back against Philadelphia. You travel and play Miami the next day. Miami's coming off of 2 days rest while you're playing 3 games in 4 nights and traveling in between. You got a couple days off, then you play the Lakers and the Raptors back-to-back, and Toronto's going to have a rest advantage, right? Like, this is a real stretch for them where this could be, kind of make or break territory in terms of, maintaining that confidence, maintaining that buy-in. So Darius Garland's questionable for Friday. I'm hoping that he's back. If you get one of Garland and Mitchell, I think you can feel pretty confident about what you're going to do against Detroit. And then after that, man, like, every win, if you get a win, it's going to be a quality win because those are all quality opponents. So if they can even go, 3-2 over that stretch and get some good wins, I think that would be something that you could kind of hang your hat on and build some confidence there.
In this early portion of the season, it is okay to just survive in advance. It is okay to just feel like you can get just some ground underneath you where you bank a couple wins here or there. As long as you get those done, it's not necessarily about building rhythm at this point of the year. It is more about just figuring things out, getting on the same page, getting on track health-wise, and getting everybody kind of comfortable with the idea of playing together. I think that this Cleveland team will be just fine. I know that there are some concerns about the schedule. I know that there are some concerns about the kind of teams that they're going to face. I still believe in this group. I think they'll be a top 4 seed by the end of the year. And we'll still have some of the same concerns by the end, I'm sure. But hopefully we will have some answers as well.
Yeah, and ultimately the playoffs are going to be what test this. And there's been concerns about Evan Mobley's performance, but then you look at it. Oh, he's averaging career best in points, rebounds, assists, blocks, steals, free throw percentage. Percentage of unassisted field goals is the best of his career. Like he's been great since Jared Allen's come back. Like I think one of the lazy things people do is they look at Evan Mobley and they go 7-footer center, you're a center, right? Like to quote role models, you white then you Ben Affleck, right? Like it's just if you're tall, you have to play the 5, and like really the ground he needs to cover from a player development standpoint is things he needs to do individually. He needs to work on his face-up game. He needs to develop a consistent mid-range jumper, the processing speed. Like that's all there, no matter who he's playing with. And I think with the Cavs playing at more tempo, having more options to go to, I think sometimes he's trying to make the right play all the time, where he needs to be a little more decisive and assertive. Where this oftentimes the wrong decision is better than indecision, and I think you're seeing a much better version of Evan Mobley since he's come back. And I would be completely negligent if I didn't shout out probably the most consistent member of the Cavs this season, which has been Karis LeVert. I think he should absolutely be one of the leading Six Man of the Year candidates. His offense has been great. He's been locked in on the defensive end, night in, night out. He has been incredibly consistent and has really stepped up as that point of attack defender with Isaac Okoro out. So big shout out to Karis LeVert.
Love it. This team, they have a lot of reasons to be excited. I'm sorry. I'm sad that we didn't mention Karras until this point, because he does feel like that extra element that a team like a Cleveland needs, where, hey, things don't necessarily work out in the first couple of stretches. Karras can definitely bail you out in a lot of different ways. So good player to have. But we're out of time. He is Justin Rowan, covering the Cleveland Cavaliers for the Chase Down Pod. Thank you so much for hopping on, man. Really excited to chat again in 6 weeks.
Yeah, hopefully things are much better. Appreciate you having me on, and looking forward to it, buddy.
All right, joined now by Kevin Ferrigan, our Chicago Bulls correspondent, host of the Dennis Podman podcast. Kevin, thank you so much for popping on, man. Really appreciate you taking the time. Let's talk about the Chicago Bulls, who are now 4-8. Not a great showing so far this season, and we just got done watching the Orlando Magic beat them at the buzzer, basically, with a Paolo Banchero turnaround. What was your kind of main takeaway from that game?
I mean, that the Bulls are bad. They're a bad basketball team. That game, for most of it, was a crime against basketball. I think I think they had like 25 points with they were halfway through the second quarter. That was a much less close game than the ending would suggest. They fought back. They did the thing that they always do, people that procrastinated too much in school. They wait until the very last minute to try to. Ryan is raising his hand for the audio listeners. Yes. But like those procrastinators, they wait till the very end to try to do their work. They try to do everything all at once, and sometimes that works, but more often than not, it's not worth doing it that way. And that's what happened to the Bulls. They came all the way back. Zach LaVine, for once, hit a really clutch shot, but he left almost 8 seconds left on the game clock, and that gave the Magic enough time to score again and win the game. Disappointing loss, but honestly, at this point, I've already come completely off of my optimism, especially with the rumors I'm sure we'll talk about with Zach LaVine. I'm ready, man. Give me the ping pong balls. Whatever, man. This season is, I don't see a path to it being like a good season from a record standpoint. So throw it in the garbage. Let's get some ping pong balls.
That's too bad. So what happened then? Because in between when we talked preseason and now, the Bulls are 4-8. They're bottom 10 in offense on cleaning the glass, but their defense has regressed. I don't think anybody expected them to have a fantastic offense, but the defense has really kind of been way worse than I think people expected. They had a players only meeting on opening nights. They benched Patrick Williams, and Zach LaVine is now in trade rumors. Like, it is a horrible start to the season for Chicago. Just, can you point to anything in particular that has been really kind of a turning point for this group, or is it just kind of everything going bad at once?
Oh, it's one thing for sure. They don't like each other. Like, they don't like playing together. That was the thing that I underestimated, is that they, like the fan base, none of them have been happy with how this has been going. And I think they know probably better than anyone that it wasn't going to get a whole lot better, that they don't like to play together. They know that they don't have as much success as they should on paper. And yeah, I think everybody's kind of over it. And I underestimated that. An easy thing to do sometimes if you're being optimistic, if you lose sight of these guys being human and sports being a very human endeavor where egos and just not even just egos, but just like the human condition of like just being tired of being in the same rut and grind for multiple years on end can make you want to tap out of it. And I really feel like this team just collectively has tapped out on one another.
It's too bad, because there were moments where this group was very fun. They feel few and far between at this point, and it has been a while, but it's basically since Lonzo was healthy. But now,
that was when it was fun. Was when Lonzo was around, and then cruel fate took his knee and him from us.
Man, he's so good, and I know it has been lost in the massive amount of injuries that he has sustained, and the knee that is just not really healed properly for him. But it is really too bad, and kind of tore apart this franchise in a lot of different ways.
Who could believe that having a point guard that really lifts the ceiling of your team, injuring his knee could potentially ruin an era in a window. What city could have ever had that happen before?
Chicago's never had anything like that happen before. That's crazy. That would be that's absurd.
It's wild. If that happened more than once, you might start to think that your team was cursed.
Ooh. There's some Michael Jordan joke there somewhere.
Yeah.
Man, I am almost feeling like really bad at this point in now having to transition into talking about trade rumors, because Zach LaVine, it was just made public that he and the Bulls seem willing at least to explore different avenues, to explore a trade, and whether it's a move to a specific destination or just a move away from Chicago, it seems like both sides are kind of ready to at least make that public now. Where are you at with it? What would be your target kind of package for a guy like Zach LaVine, and can you see any destinations where it might make sense?
Sure. Yeah. So I've made my peace with that. Zach was not going to be a Bull much longer in the offseason, when there were all those rumors that the Bulls desperately wanted to trade him, which, they're great at maintaining the value of their players in the trade market. They love nothing more than to run a guy down before they trade him, so they get the minimal possible return.
Sounds like you seem a little bit jaded, Kevin. What happened?
Well, I've followed this franchise since they ran Michael Jordan and Phil Jackson out of town prematurely. It wears on you after a while. Jerry Reinsdorf, sell the team. But it's it's, I don't know. I've made my peace with them losing Zach. I was encouraged this summer that they weren't just taking any offer, but because that seemed like the holdup with trying to trade him this summer, was that just they weren't getting good offers. Right. The flip side of that, though, is that they were like loud. It wasn't like I'm not anybody, and I heard like through 2 degrees of separation from people that actually know things that like they were like really trying to get rid of Zach, and so that doesn't help his market value. So they put themselves in like this untenable situation where they don't want to take a bad return for Zach, but they've made it so clear that they are done with him that I don't really know like what a good, like what, when you've already pre-negotiated against yourself like that, what does a good package look like? I would like a young player, salary filler, and like at least 2 first-round picks, like decent ones, not like, going to be late first rounders. I don't know if Karnisovas can pull that off. I don't think he's won a single negotiation, whether with a player or with a team in a trade, since he's gotten in the job. So, I'm not optimistic about him negotiating a good value on this trade, especially not with Clutch behind the scenes already exerting pressure now. Well, not now. I mean, they've been doing, but it's less behind the scenes now and more in front of the scenes. They've taken it from one side of the curtain to the other. But yeah, I don't feel great about it, but I also am just ready to move on from this era of Bulls basketball. So at this point, I'm just like, pull the Band-Aid off. Let's go.
Yeah, with DeMar kind of on his expiring contract, Vucevic,
he looks cooked. He does not look good.
DeMar
does not look good so far.
DeMar's been tough. He also like playing power forward, that will do that to you. Just having to do that.
Well, also being 34, like
sure,
I'm 37 now, but like even when I was 34, it was. I mean, I'm not a high level athlete by any means, but I just know like being a 34-year-old, your body doesn't feel good. It really doesn't, and it doesn't get better. So like that's to that point. I really hope that the Bulls don't give him an extension because. You can see the signs of decline pretty significantly to start this year, and maybe it'll bounce back. Maybe it'll just take him longer to like, ease into his old man body in seasons going forward. But I don't want to be paying his next contract. Like, I don't know. I'm not
reducing his role, like for whatever team he is on going forward, seems like the right call. But if it is the Bulls, I don't feel great about the idea of trading Zach LaVine and then building around DeMar. Like that just doesn't seem like the right call. And if they are going to trade Zach, then it's going to have to come with kind of a entire reshuffling of the organization, in my opinion.
It should if they were a competent organization, but the scuttlebutt that I've heard is that they want to just trade Zach and keep like Alex Caruso and DeMar DeRozan and just try. They like think that Zach is the problem and not like their top to bottom failures. Like, it's
to me,
really
don't take this the wrong way.
It doesn't make sense.
Don't take this the wrong way, but like the problem is that they don't have a top guy and they don't have a top 2 guy really. Like Zach is probably more comparable to a Bradley Beal or somewhere in that general range instead of the Devin
I think
Booker.
He's better than Bradley Beal. I'll push back on that a little bit. I think Bradley Beal hasn't been good for a few years, but
sure.
And I think Zach is still very good. I just think that the problem with Zach is that Zach thinks Zach is a top 8 player. Yeah. And so for Zach to really thrive, he needs to be on a team where he is clearly not the man. He needs to be on a team with somebody of like the level of like a Luka or a Giannis, or he can't be on Giannis's team because Dame's already there. But like, if they could swing a trade with Dallas, he would look great there as the third guy with Kyrie and Luka. He would look amazing, and I think he would actually accept playing a role with those guys because Kyrie has the respect of every hooper. People all think that guy is like basically God. And Zach is nothing if not a hooper. And Luka is Luka. Like everybody knows that Luka is a bad man. I don't know if we're allowed to curse, but
yeah, you're good. You're good. What about Golden State for Clay and somebody like Kuminga and draft picks?
So I would want Brandon Podziemski. I liked him in the draft, and I like him better already than Kuminga. I'm not a Kuminga guy. I might want Moses Moody and Podziemski. I'd take Clay's contract just to wipe the Zach contract off, basically. And yeah, if they threw in a couple of picks, that's like it's not an amazing return, but I really like Podziemski, even as just like a bench guard. And I think Moses Moody can be like someday can be a slightly below average starter. Right now, I think he's still not great, but
I think he's probably got a higher ceiling than that, in my opinion. But either
I think
way,
his ceiling's higher. I just don't think he's going to hit it.
Sure.
Like most people don't.
Most important thing, and like in all of these situations, you're looking for an expiring contract to kind of clear your books. You're looking for a young prospect. You're looking for some draft capital, and the hope being
again, this is what you would do if you were a sane team. But the Bulls are a team that thinks that Zach is the problem, so they might just take like not even expiring contracts. They like just might take like players they think are good back and like not even get picks because that's the kind of franchise they are.
I like the idea.
Dumb stuff that they do.
I like the idea because you mentioned, hey, who is the alpha? Who is the guy? Put him with Steph. Steph is the alpha. Steph is
that would be great for his career. To put him in the Klay Thompson role.
Yeah, and like he's better than Klay by a lot right now, and there's no reason why he couldn't flourish in a system like that because I think he would commit to more off-ball movement if he believed in the actual system working. The problem is that in Chicago he hasn't really done that because I can't imagine he feels that there's much of a payoff for committing to that level of system.
Well, there's not a system though. That's the other thing. Is that Billy Donovan is a very good defensive coach, but his offense is generally just to kind of let guys cook and do what they want, which doesn't like lend itself to structure and the ability to put a guy like Zach in a role that you want him in. Instead, it just gives him all the room to freelance, which is like just giving him enough rope to hang himself. It's just it's not good.
He's got to be in some structure for sure. But look, it is what it is. We'll probably have multiple conversations about this as they try to figure out what to do. Is there anything else you want to cover for the Bulls before we get out of here?
Stop making excuses for Patrick Williams. He's been bad. It's fine to say that he's been bad. He's been very bad, and he's not the only problem on the team. There's a lot of them, but stop acting like he's not one of them, because I see a lot of that. There's a lot of people that treat Patrick Williams like a small animal to be protected or something. And he's a basketball player. He's playing bad. It's okay to criticize him for playing bad. He's fine on defense. He's good on defense. But his offense is inexcusable.
Him not being able to get a shot up at the end of that game, that we just watched.
That's like just awareness stuff. Like that. That's also just the kind of stuff that like will drive me crazy because like it's just like no time and situation. Like how like that's like the most basic stuff.
Look at the clock. Look where you are. Get up a shot. Like it's to me it is something that has always plagued him. It is that kind of awareness on both ends of the floor.
That is the thing. A lot of people could say he's not aggressive. So I'll say this quickly. We can get out of here. A lot of people say that Pat's not aggressive. The problem isn't that Pat isn't aggressive so much. Is that he takes forever to figure out what he's going to do. His processing speed is just not there really on either end. I mean, he makes up for it on defense because he's such a physical specimen, and like it's hard for guys to move him. And he does slide his feet well, but like just in terms of like just knowing what to do, he always feels like he's a step behind it. But especially on offense, it's like his decision tree should be so small because it's just like, catch the ball. Am I open? Okay, I should shoot. If not, then drive, like, or pass or swing. Like those are it's a very simple decision tree. And he just like short circuits a lot of the times, even when he's open. And yeah, it's not good. His mind is actually his biggest thing holding him back, and not in the way that people mostly say, which is like he needs to be more aggressive or he doesn't have the dog in him. It's like, no, he just like he's thinking a lot out there, way more than you want.
He needs to be in a situation where the team is clearly rebuilding and they give him opportunities to learn and to fail and to improve.
Yeah.
And
well, that's not going to happen here because this isn't an incompetent organization.
On that note, he is Kevin Ferrigan, a host of the Dennis Podman Show. Make sure to go follow him on Twitter at NBA Couchside. Kevin, thank you so much for hopping on, man. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Ryan.
All right, joined now by Khalil. He's the host of Locked On Pistons. Thank you so much, Ku, for hopping on. Really appreciate you taking the time. Let's talk about Detroit. Let's talk about not a great start to the season. It felt like it was going to be a good start with a 2-1 record, and honestly, it just turned to 2-10 really quickly, didn't it?
Yeah, things definitely went south very, very quickly, and it has the potential because of the upcoming schedule to really spiral out of control, which was definitely not how the Pistons wanted this to go.
Yeah, it's too bad. 23rd in net rating, 23rd in offense, 22nd in defense, just feels really below average across the board in a lot of ways. I think the numbers are a little bit better than what the record suggests. It's just like the actual kind of clutch time stuff and finishing off games has been it's tougher in some aspects, but there have also been some blowouts here and there. Cade's numbers have been both good and bad, I think, depending on who you ask. Some of the actual points and assist numbers and leading the team have been pretty good. Some of the efficiency numbers have been pretty bad. How do you help him out? What's been the story behind Cade's return to the court?
It's been a very toxic time in the Pistons community because of what's going on with Cade. So the starting lineup that the Detroit Pistons opened up the season with was Cade, Killian Hayes, Asar Thompson, Isaiah Stewart, and Jalen Duren. The whole idea behind that was to go defense first. Troy Weaver has talked about building a defensive identity, getting back to what the Pistons are supposed to be about when they won games or won championships and stuff. And Monty Williams has done nothing but echo that. So it made sense at that point. Like, okay, it seems like they're really they're being serious. They're not just talking about it. They, for real, are saying defense is going to be a big deal for them. So obviously that meant they didn't start Jane Ivey. Bojan Bogdanovic is hurt. Monte Morris was hurt. But that was the lineup they went with. And they started off 2-1. And it was honestly, it looked promising because of the play of Cade and then the play of Jalen Duren, who, if the Pistons wanted to go defense first, their only chance of doing so was with Jalen Duren healthy. And once Jalen Duren got hurt in Game 4, everything's now went out of control. And that's one of the main reasons why it's killed Cade efficiency-wise, is one, he doesn't have his lob threat, his pick-and-roll partner, which is what they did a lot in the first 3 games. He doesn't have that guy. When he has played, he hasn't been healthy. He's hurt it twice, trying to play through it. Jalen Duren, that is, his ankle, which is not good.
Not good.
So, doesn't have his pick-and-roll partner. And by going defense first in the starting lineup without the guy that's really going to make it defensive first, you're then basically just playing a lineup that doesn't make sense at that point. Like, with Jalen Duren, it's like, okay, you have good defenders in front of him. He's going to be a great rim protector. He was that through the first 3 games. It looked like he was making this insane jump at 19 years old. It's like, oh my God, he's averaging like 2.5 blocks a game. He's averaging like 16 rebounds a game. The dude's carrying. And the defense was working. But then once he got hurt, now you're just playing a bunch of guys who can't shoot. Or Killian Hayes is actually shooting 38% over the last 9 games. Stu is shooting 44% from 3 this year. The problem is that these guys hitting open shots, it sounds really weird to say this for people listening probably, but those guys hitting open shots is like defenses are taking that as a win. Like they just because they're hitting open shots doesn't mean they have gravity with their shots. The defenses are choosing that's who they want to take the open shots because they don't respect them. And everyone's just sitting in the paint on Cade. So you have Killian's defender helping off. You have Isaiah Stewart's defender helping off. Asar Thompson, who we'll talk about soon. Asar Thompson's guy helping off. Marvin Bagley, who's been playing for Jalen Duren, his guy obviously not respecting him at 3. So Cade's really, since Duren went down and got hurt in the Game 4, he's dealing with a lineup that has no spacing and no gravity outside of him, and he's attracting the entire defense anytime he puts the ball on the ground. Last thing I'll say is that there was a game against Atlanta, or actually not Atlanta, the game before Atlanta, team played a 2-3 zone, and it was basically a double Cade with 3 people in the backside zone at the top of the key. Every time Cade got the ball at the top of the key, they just played up and took the ball away from him, played aggressive as I've ever seen someone play at the nail, and said, if you're going to hit the guy at the wing and have him hit a 3, so be it. Like, it's going to happen, but you're not going to beat us. And that's the kind of coverages he's been dealing with, and it's killing his efficiency.
Yeah, I know that there has been a lot of discussion about, man, can he be the guy if he's not efficient enough? Can he be the guy if things are are not running well when he's running the keys. I don't subscribe to that at all. I think that there are some things that he can help himself in some ways, but at some point the Pistons are going to have to help him by playing the right people. And this Ivy situation has been odd. Everything about it has been just very crazy. I know Killian is your guy in some ways, but he just doesn't really make a lot of sense if you're playing a lineup with Asar Thompson and Cade Cunningham and hopefully Jalen Duren at that point. So I'm going to ask you, let's do it now. Build me your ideal lineup around Cade, Asar, and Jalen Duren.
So I'm glad you asked me this. I do want to buffer your point that you said at the beginning of this, is that I said this on the podcast literally yesterday, Locked On Pistons. Cade, I think, is going to be a superstar. I think he's going to be absolutely fantastic. I love him. But he's not one yet. He's not that good yet. He's not that good of a player right now, and that's okay to say. He needs help. People are saying that, like, oh, well, great players, they make their teammates better. They can get through this kind of stuff. Cade's not great yet. He's 22.
It takes time. And like, even for a guy like Jokic, for a guy like LeBron, it took time for those guys to get there. And Cade missed his entire second season. People have to be more patient with this dude and don't try to box him in with like in a phone booth and then expect him to make magic out of mincemeat.
Right. So that's just, I want to make that clear. Like, yes, I think Cade's going to be great in the long term, but his team still needs to help him when he's not yet. Like, he's still growing. He is still developing himself, and his team needs to help him. So my ideal starting lineup, it really just depends, because if the Pistons want to keep some semblance of like defense, then it's tough. It's going to be tough to do so. If you wanted me to build like the best lineup that just offensively best optimizes Cade with what they have, which is what it seems like a lot of people would like them to do, makes sense. He's a franchise player. Makes sense.
Sure.
I'd probably go Cade, Ivy. If everyone's healthy, I'd go Cade, Ivy, Asar, or Cade, Ivy, Bojan, Asar, put Asar at the 4, and then Duren. That's probably the lineup I'd go with. I'd experiment possibly with like a Cade, Ivy, Livers, Asar, Duren, because then Livers has much better team defender, a good shooter as well on the wing, sneaky athletic. So he's not going to bring the same type of gravity Bojan is, but he's going to bring some gravity while not being as a bad defender like Bojan is. I'd experiment with that. And something I think you're probably going to see, Monty did say today that he's going to be tinkering with stuff to get Cade more spacing on the floor. Based off the things he's said lately, and based off the evidence of what you've been seeing him slowly start to use Cade in the last 2 games, I think there's a good chance. Now, people don't go crazy on me. I'm just the messenger here. But I think there's a slight chance that you might see something like Ivy, Killian, Cade, Asar, Duren, or a 3-guard lineup with Cade, and play him off ball and have multiple ball handlers around him to maintain some defense and get Ivy on the floor, who can really collapse defenses and really cause pressure off ball. I don't think it's likely that happens, but we've seen them now play 3-guard lineups a lot the last few games with Killian, Cade, whether it's Killian, Cade, Sasser, Killian, Cade, Ivy. And I think that is just a slight chance to throw out there. It's a possible chance, but I do think my pick, if I had to pick one, I'd go Cade, Ivy, Bojan, Asar, Duren, when they're all healthy.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. And I think there's the logic of add a stretch 4, add somebody who can, like, combination with a rim rolling 5 makes a lot of sense. And then you've got your defense, all defense guy in Asar. And then you probably need some sort of combo guard next to Cade, somebody who can handle the ball a little bit, can play off the ball a little bit. It's why this Ivy situation to me has been so odd, because to me, it feels so logical for him to be out there and for them to learn how to play together. But c'est la vie. That's not what's going to happen clearly, and or maybe it will, and maybe this is something that Monty's kind of slow playing. Let me ask you this: when can we expect Bojan and Monty Morris back? Because I feel like there have been conflicting reports and non-reports about it.
So the report that we got, that the PR team sent out 4 weeks ago, I believe it was October 25th or somewhere. Yeah, October 24th or 25th, I believe. They said in 3 to 4 weeks, you'd get an update or reevaluation on Bojan. In 3 to 4 weeks, you get a reevaluation on Monte Morris, and you get a reevaluation on Isaiah Livers. Now, today, Isaiah Livers was practicing, so that sounds like he's getting pretty close to coming back. We have not heard anything on Bojan. And we heard that Monte Morris still did not practice today. That's all we've gotten. I think Livers will come back soon, within the next week probably. I think he's probably coming back soon. The Monte Morris and Bojan Bogdanovic situation, and heck, even throw Alec Burks situation in there as well. It's really going to be an interesting thing to watch for the next month, I'd say. Because I'm not saying this is likely. I wouldn't bet my money on this. But there is definitely, like, there's pathways. There's this tiny pathway. If you squint, like through the forest with, it's very hidden. There's a pathway where Bojan just doesn't play for the Pistons this year. Like, he gets traded before he even, like, puts on the Pistons uniform again. I think there's a slight chance. I don't think it's as likely at all. But there is a slight chance that maybe Monte Morris gets traded within the next month. Same thing with Alec Burks. It's just a very weird situation. Maybe not weird, interesting situation going on right now, because the Pistons, when they got Monte Morris, it was to replace basically Killian Hayes. But they kept Killian around to try to prove if he actually developed this offseason. I heard he had a strong offseason. The front office heard about it. They gave him a chance in preseason to show it. He played really well in preseason, so he got the start to start the year. First 2 games didn't go well. Last 9 games, he's averaging like 10 and 6 on 43-38 splits. So he's playing well last 9 games. So now you find yourself in this position of, oh, he actually has played decent. Like, he actually has gotten better. And the guy we just replaced him with, or we got him to replace him, is hurt, and he's coming back. So now what do we do? Like, we can't play both of them. So who's trading? Are we getting rid of one of them? Are we sitting one on the bench? Same thing with Bojan. Bojan was going to start this year, but he was hurt. So now Asar's starting. And now we're seeing how great Asar, like how amazing Asar is. So now what happens? Like, Bojan comes back, and is the whole defensive mindset now going out the window? Is Bojan coming back to the starting lineup? Is Bojan going to get traded now? Like, and then they have the issue of not having a backup 5 now with Duren being out.
To be clear, like, the logical solution to that is to start Bojan at the 4 and let Isaiah Stewart back up at the 5. Why is that not really a consideration? It seems kind of
that's
odd.
What I would. Yes, that's what I would do. I'd play Stu as the backup 5 and start Duren. But when Duren's been out, I mean, they don't even trust James Wiseman. They just won't play. Like, the first game Duren was out, they just didn't play Wiseman. They wouldn't play him. Second game, they tried to play him and then just didn't play him in the second half. He had a fine stint this past game, but they clearly don't trust Wiseman as the third big. So without Duren, you're like stacked up on all these guards that are coming back healthy, and you're like, oh, how is this? Like, where are we going to fit these minutes? Meanwhile, you don't have enough centers for all the jokes Weaver has gotten over the last few years of 11 big men. Now all of a sudden they don't have 5s. So it's a very, very interesting situation. I don't know when they're coming back. Livers should be back soon. They should be getting really evaluated if the report was true, what we got. They should be getting really evaluated at some point this week, and we should get some kind of update soon.
Look, I can understand why this team is 2-10. When your veterans are out and you're playing a bunch of young guys and you're trying to figure out, and guys are kind of out of position and it's a little bit uncomfortable, obviously it's logical why they're 2-10. They've got to start showing something together at some point, and this is what this year is all about. I remember the Orlando Magic started last year pretty badly, and then they figured it out, and they started playing together, and they developed some chemistry, and lo and behold, you start to see the vision with that group. This group does have that potential to do it too, and I think we should wrap it up with this. Asar Thompson, we've talked around him a little bit. The dude is so fun to watch, and I know Thinking Basketball, Ben Taylor, he put out an awesome Asar Thompson video that everybody should go check out. I am blown away by the movement, by the athleticism, and by the feel. Like, he looks like the next great defensive player.
He's fantastic, dude. Like, there's nothing else. Like, I can't. Now, he obviously still has stuff he has to develop. He doesn't have a jumper right now. Like, he still has to get better. His finishing with his footwork on his drives and his finishes need to get better. It'll help his finishing. So there's areas he needs to improve on. He's a rookie, obviously. But, I mean, this is a guy I've been high on since before the draft. This is who I wanted the Pistons to draft. I love both him and his brother. I don't think there's, like, outside him and Amen, I don't know how many athletes you'd say there are better than them, athleticism-wise, in the NBA. Like, it'd be hard to find one. And him defensively, it's just crazy. He makes plays defensively that are just like, you should not be able to do that. He'll get beat off the dribble. You think a guy has a step on him, and like like that, he's back in front of them. He's back in front of them. He's blocking their shot. He's blocking jump shots, step back jump shots from Damian Lillard. He's completely shutting down SGA. Like, and I watched the thing in basketball video too. It was a fantastic breakdown. Ausar has been fantastic defensively. Most rookies are bad defensively, but he's like not just good for a rookie. Like I've been saying on the podcast, I'm not even joking. Like, there's a possibility he might be like a top 10 defender right now, like through the first 11 games, 12 games. Like, that's how crazy defensively he's been. And then you talked about his feel. His feel is off the charts. High IQ player, plays the right way, isn't trying to take 30 shots, 20 shots a game, just trying to make the right play all the time. Crazy vision, crazy transition playmaker. Kind of reminds me of Lonzo in transition. Like, there's so much to like about this dude. It's just, he's proven, I think already through 12 games, he's not going to be just a piece for he's one of their cornerstones. Like, he is right there with Cade and Durant as a cornerstone piece. Like, he is going to be a rock of this team.
Get healthy. Play Cade, Jalen, and Durant, or Cade, Jalen, and Ausar together. Find some shooting. Like, it should not be this hard. This can really turn around, and I have zero reason to doubt that Detroit can make this happen. They can do this, and this could turn into something really fun really quickly. But some tough moves may have to be made, and I hope that Monty Williams is the right guy to do it. So we will see. He is Khalil, host of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Everybody, make sure to go give him a follow. Make sure to go check out his work over at Locked On Pistons. Koo, thank you so much for checking in with me. I'll talk to you in 6 weeks, all right?
Appreciate you, man.
All right, everybody, that is going to do it for this episode of The Alley-Oop. Thank you so much to my Central Division correspondents for popping on. Always really appreciate talking to this crew. So many awesome voices, so many interesting perspectives. Always appreciate learning more about the Central Division. Next week is Thanksgiving. Probably going to give my Pacific Division folks the week off, so you'll be hearing from a special guest on Tuesday, but there will not be an episode on Friday, just so that everybody has a good holiday weekend. Hope everybody enjoys their weekend. Make sure to rate, review, and follow the podcast. We'll talk to you guys next week.